crowdfunded this,
Okay.
which I'm very happy to talk to you about. Which I think
just this title of that rape gang report.
Yeah.
The idea that there's actual rape gangs in the UK in 2026, and is it being ignored? Is it being downplayed? Like, how is it being received by the media and by the politicians over there?
Well, the history of it is that basically, as you probably know, Britain, after the war, decided they were going to play a part in Europe, a bigger part in Europe. Well, our elite did, the British elite. And to do that, they had to basically diminish the power of the nation state, and they had to head towards this European superstate, which is the EU, the genesis of which was obviously a monopoly.
Why did they have to diminish the power of the nation to do that?
Because I think Britain was a proud nation state. We with the American help, we'd won the war, and we hadn't been invaded or conquered, which most of Europe had been. So you'd had mass dislocation in Europe. Huge numbers of people had been dislocated and pushed all over Europe. And I think the socialists, I was in the European Parliament, so I spent a brief time as an MEP, a member of the European Parliament, when we finally achieved, a kind of Brexit. We can talk about that, but it wasn't a proper Brexit. So I think the genesis of the rape gangs, going back to this, was the fact that multiculturalism was the order of the day. They wanted open borders. They wanted a multicultural society. They basically felt the nation state had been the cause of world wars, effectively starting with Napoleon. Then obviously we had the Kaiser, then we had Hitler. And I think they saw it that way, the Monnets, the Spinellis, and the people who constructed the European Union. So to the rape gang report, which was your question, ultimately the genesis of that is this multicultural invasion almost of Europe. When the rape gang report, which we've written, was crowdfunded by 20,000 concerned English people who we raised not a huge amount of money. We raised about £600,000 in varying quantities people gave, and we did it because the government will not have a statutory inquiry. So our government, and particularly the Labour Party, have been presiding over this because it goes to the Muslim bloc vote. So we have in the UK a system of postal voting. And in a lot of the inner cities and the places where these Islamic populations live, they are or have historically voted Labour. That's beginning to change. They're beginning to vote for Muslim independence now. And I sit with some of them at the back of Parliament. So effectively, this inquiry we did, we set out with a completely unbiased view of what we would find. And we did it because we were pushing the government to have a statutory inquiry. And a lot of the reason I got involved in it was I think it was Elon Musk who triggered. He talked about it because a lot of people in the UK, I don't think, know the extent to which this has been happening and the length of time it's been happening.
Why is that? What is that, a failure of your media? Is it a failure of the politicians? Like, why don't people know about
Well,
this?
it's a total failure of the media, because the media are supposed to be an independent body that holds to account failures of the state. And it's basically because this block vote through the postal voting system, which needs to be changed, is effectively, or has been, keeping the Labour Party in power. So they've put power ahead of principle. And in the report we cover this. We've covered the reasons why it's so serious. And we what we wanted to do was interview victims, which we did. We did it properly. It took us over a year. We had a rape gang victim, Sammy Woodhouse, who led it. She's got a child by her rapist. And we had a team of people, and we literally produced the witness bundles, and we listened to the witnesses, and then we had a 2-week hearing in London where people gave evidence, and we had a proper barrister who effectively presided over it and then helped us write the report. It's effectively Graham Smith, the barrister, did a fantastic job. And we didn't start out with any preconceived ideas. It started because we read some court transcripts of some of the people who've been found guilty of this, which the government, by the way, has tried to keep quiet. Some of the historical court transcripts disappear. So we've been calling for these transcripts to be kept now. We've actually tried to make a noise about that. And the more we read this and the more we carried on with the rape gang inquiry, the more it became clear to us that obviously there's a link between this power and the abuse and grooming and if you like, damage that was done to white working class English girls. And it does go, and in the report we've looked at the reasons why, to your point, there is a cultural difference of opinion between an open, high trust Christian view of women particularly and the Islamic view of women, which is all in the report. So for instance, as you probably know, if a woman accuses somebody of rape, and a lot of these Muslims come from Pakistan, Joe. They're predominantly Pakistan, and they're predominantly from one part of Pakistan called Mirpur. There are some from Bangladesh, there are some from Somalia, there are some from Eritrea. There are other Muslim countries that perpetrate some of this. And of course there are white people who perpetrate rape as well, but nothing on the scale of this. This is quite horrific. And our report has effectively uncovered this. I think we've played a part with this report in the government saying that they're going to have now a statutory inquiry, because we didn't have any statutory powers to be able to force people to appear at our hearing. They all appeared voluntarily. The government can actually force people legally to appear. They can actually make it a legal requirement that people attend. We couldn't do that. But there had been reports in the past. There was the Jay report in 2014, and there's been the Casey report, all of which confirmed that this was happening, and the state still continued to try and pretend it was just happening in a small number of siloed areas where you obviously had a high Islamic population. The state has equally failed to collect data on the crimes that are perpetrated, so the ethnicity of the people who are perpetrating the crimes, and from there you can extrapolate, once you've got the data, as to whether or not you've got an extraordinary problem in one particular section of society. And again, using my parliamentary questions, I've been forcing as much disclosure as I can get, and this is how we've discovered that a lot of the data that should be being collected by the police particularly, by the National Health Service, by social services, a lot of the data has not been properly collected. Possibly because the state does, I think, know that this is happening, but they don't want to admit that their multicultural experiment, which, as you probably know, famously Enoch Powell warned would fail with his speech, the Rivers of Blood speech, for which he was heavily criticised. So I think they do know, but they don't want to admit it. They don't want to be called racist. They don't want to, and this has permeated the whole of British society since Tony Blair. People are frightened to be accused of effectively being biased and white. And we're taught about things, I don't know whether you have it here, unconscious bias and all of the other sort of what I call woke DEI-driven rubbish, which has permeated Britain in the same way. I think it may have originally come from you guys, but it's certainly had a huge effect on us under the Islamic code. I think that the Muslims are frightened of female sexuality. It's all there, and as you know, you get FGM, female genital mutilation. So these cultures, I think, Joe, and to your point, are just incompatible unless you have a very strong government which basically protects its electorate from any subversive behavior which is not compatible with our values.
You keep using the term meat. Is that how they actually refer to it as?
That's how they consider it. Yeah.
What do they say? Like how are they?
Well, it's in our report. That there was actually I think it was. Is it a translation of? I think Thomas Jefferson actually. It's in our report. Asked the Barbary pirates about the way in which they treated their slaves and their women. That was particularly slaves. They just also slavery is accepted within Islamic countries. So I think they have their own codes. They have their own terms of reference, and there is a quote in there I'd have to look at the report to give it to you, but where one of them does liken white girls not dressing as Muslim girls dress, and he does liken it to meat.
Jesus.
And you know, that is an analogy he used. So I mean, yeah, I think that's what they think.
This rape gang inquiry report that you have just released, the number, I want you to say it because it sounds so crazy. If I say it, it's going to sound wrong. What the number of people that were victims, the estimate?
Well, we've estimated that a minimum of 250,000 rapes have taken place. It's probably much more, Joe, because we published in here, I think it's a list of 147 parts of the UK where this is happening. Now the government tries to tell you it's happening in Rochdale, Oldham, you know, one or two Bradford, one or two centres, and that's why their statutory inquiry, the terms of reference of that, have now been downgraded. So they make it look as if it's not a systemic problem, but just a little local problem, which it isn't. So we've listed here, and they're all in here, the places where we know it's happening from our rape gang inquiry. But every time we publish this, Joe, I get people emailing us or sending us messages on social media to say, what about Red Ruth in Cornwall? What about it's happening here, it's happening here, it's happening here? So I think it's incredibly widespread. And there's, you know, other people who've corroborated that 250,000 figure. That's an incredibly conservative figure. You can't be exact because the state is not collecting the data, which they should be doing. And we've been lobbying in Parliament to make sure that the state's collection of the data improves. And then we can actually see the extent of the problem, and you can actually pinpoint it in the same way that we've done it in this report. So this is, I think it's linked to organised crime. I think it's linked to the drug trade. I'm pretty sure it's linked to the drug trade. And obviously it's linked to prostitution. So as usual, with an evil like this, and you've got girls who are transported around in the back of pickups and in cages. And at our rape gang inquiry, we had examples of girls who were raped by dogs and filmed, either anally raped or vaginally raped, and literally watched, filmed. And a lot of it's about servitude and about, you know, there's other stories in here about women having to lick the feet of their rapists. It's about power, it's about servitude, and it's about the fact that Muslim men are taught to believe that they are superior, not only to women, but they're superior to people like yourself and myself, who are considered to be, if you like, the infidels, and their job is to effectively spread Islam and effectively punish the infidel. And as you probably know, in the Crusades, if you lost to Saladin and you were a Knights Templar, a Crusader, you had two choices. You either converted to Islam or they killed you. And in the case of a lot of these girls, a lot of them were made pregnant, they were impregnated, and they then had to convert to Islam. Some of them were trafficked to Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, other parts of the world. So look, I mean, this is a massive national scandal, and I'm hoping, now I'm an MP, we've written this report, and this should stimulate debate. We've sent a copy of this on a PDF to every MP. And we're going to send this printed copy to all of them as well. Because everybody in power should look at this and they should start to correct it immediately.
You use the term, or the term is used, rape gang. Why are you saying gang? And this is an organized practice?
Yes.
So it's not as simple as Islamic men are raping poor white girls. It's that they go out in gangs specifically for this purpose. These are properly organized gangs who are grooming and abusing young girls as young as 10 or 11, and then literally trafficking them around the country. We know that from the testimonies we've had.
So originally, when I went into Parliament, I was elected late. So I was elected in July 24. So at the tender age of 67. We heard them being referred to as Asian grooming gangs, which I think is a misnomer because it's unfair on, for instance, the Japanese or other Asian cultures who don't do this. So thanks to Elon Musk, we actually did, and as you're quite right, thanks to him giving us a free speech platform, and Facebook's thankfully followed as well. So he's led the charge through his purchase of what was Twitter. So when I gave a speech in Parliament where I said they're not Asian grooming gangs. I'm going to call them what they are. They're Pakistani Muslim rape gangs. So I said this in Parliament. So Jamie will be able to drag it up if he goes on to the, because everything goes into Hansard. And I gave this speech, and it caused shock in the House of Commons. Now, look, I'm not the smartest kid on the block, but what I do in Parliament is I tell the truth. So, I'm only interested in telling the truth and getting to the truth and changing the way in which we govern. That's what I've gone into Parliament for. I haven't gone into this. I give my parliamentary salary to charity. I'm a reasonably successful person who's lived his life. I've been chairman of a football club. I don't know if you're interested in Premier League football, but I was chairman of Southampton, so I built the stadium for Southampton. I used to play competitive hockey, and I built up the youth academy at Southampton. I loved, the best day of my life was when we got to the cup final in 2003. We lost 1-0 to Arsenal, but it was the most amazing experience for everybody. So look, I'm not doing this because I want necessarily to be doing it. I'm doing it because somebody's got to do it. And if we're going to change Britain, we've got to get the public to buy into what we're doing. And as I say, I'm not a classic politician. I'm not saying you've got to vote for me. I'm saying that we've got to change Britain by 29, or I think the country, from what I can see, is in terminal decline. So I sit on the Public Accounts Committee. I see the waste. I see the unaccountability. I see the way in which the civil service does not serve the people which it's supposed to serve. I see our debt rising to nearly 100% of GDP. I see massive misallocation of procurement on our weapons. I see fraud in the judiciary. I see all the things that
sounds like you're talking about America.
Well, I'm talking about Britain.